Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's July 2nd. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. Today is a big day for Tesla. The company reported its quarterly sales numbers, and they are not too bad. We'll dig into Tesla's potentially changing fortunes after a terrible start to the year. First, though, we'll do a lightning round of odds and ends, starting with some low Earth orbit news where SpaceX has scored a NASA contract to blast a space station into the ocean just as the company's valuation soared above $200 billion. And in Washington, the Supreme Court rendered some opinions that could have an impact on X in a very consequential election year. And to wrap up, we'll examine, somewhat seriously, Elon's bid to turn X into Pinterest. So for our roundup, we have ace Elon Musk reporter Dana Hull. Hello, Dana.
Hey, hey.
And Max Chapkin, Businessweek senior writer. Hey, Max.
Good day, David.
Max, now, I noticed that last week while you were on, there were an awful lot of F-bombs. I want you to keep it clean this week. I got some listener mail on
Did
that.
you really?
No. Okay, so Dana, we're going to start with you in our news roundup. SpaceX gets to create something called the Space Station Deorbit Vehicle. What the heck is that?
Yeah, so the International Space Station, which has been like this home away from home for astronauts, is going to be retired. It is expected to be retired in 2030, and NASA needs help getting this station like out of space. And so SpaceX won this contract, which is worth up to $843 million to sort of deorbit the space station. And so my understanding is that SpaceX is going to create some kind of vehicle that's going to help guide the space station back through the Earth's atmosphere, at which point it will blow up and then like fall into the ocean.
So Max, how cool is this? Not only do you get to blow this thing up, you get paid to blow it up.
Objectively, probably the coolest government contract you could possibly win. But I will say, this is like it's kind of weird. Like SpaceX's whole deal is like, they are a commercial provider. They just sell these launches. And this is obviously a custom project. You know, this is kind of like an old school, what it feels like is like an old school defense contract, the kind of thing that SpaceX would have criticized maybe in the past. On the other hand, objectively cool contract. I don't see how you turn it down.
Great stuff. I mean, the press release from NASA, I got a kick out of. NASA selects International Space Station U.S. deorbit vehicle. Now, here's the thing, though, Dan, about this deorbit vehicle. My sense is that SpaceX, Elon and the crew, they get to create it, and they have a large budget now to do so. But do they actually get to do the blowing up themselves, or do they have to turn this baby over to the buttoned-up NASA crew to handle that part of it?
My understanding is that SpaceX develops the deorbit spacecraft and then turns that over to NASA.
Ooh, that's kind of a downer, right?
But NASA and SpaceX are like long-term partners. I mean, NASA was key to like SpaceX even becoming a company. And so, I mean, I don't know. The contract could be modified going forward. Maybe they will.
You got to modify. I mean, how much
want to fly in the deorbiter? I mean, it's a robot. I'm just saying this. One of the in addition to being a great industrialist, Elon apparently is quite the gamer. You could see him just like gaming out on this thing, controlling it as it's gonna blow this thing up. I mean, reading stories about this, they're gonna drop it in some part of the ocean that
this is like asteroids.
Not a lot of, I guess, marine life or whatever, but this is like the area of the ocean where they dump old spaceships. So the whole thing is fascinating, and hopefully by the time they do this, we'll have a station on the moon or something.
One would hope. Okay, Max, in other SpaceX news, its valuation is up, and up.
Yeah. So SpaceX, as we've said on this podcast many times, is a privately held company. It's a little bit unusual because it's been around for a long time, and you have employees and investors who've held stock in the company for many years, if not more than a decade. And private companies essentially like this will make tender offers. Well, they'll essentially offer to buy shares of longtime shareholders using external capital. The reporting suggests that the valuation is $210 billion, substantially up from before. I will just say, these tender offers, these valuations are not public markets valuations. Anytime we're talking about private market valuations, it's not like the definitive value of this thing. It's just sort of like what the company is telling investors that it thinks it is worth.
Well, but if it is the latest transaction that's happening, so at some level that does set a price. I mean, I guess the fact that SpaceX is willing to pay that price for the shares indicates that it thinks it's worth that much. I mean, but yeah, as you were saying, it's climbed quite a bit. I think towards the end of last year it was at $180 billion, and then $200 billion, and now $210. It is a very, 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 very large private company. Remember, the vast bulk of Elon's companies are privately held companies, i.e. not companies that trade in public stock markets, Tesla being the lone exception. But it is SpaceX that is by far the most valuable. And at this point, I would say on the cusp, Max, of being the most valuable private company in the world. Right now, the only larger one is
After ByteDance.
After ByteDance, right. Owner of TikTok. But if SpaceX's valuation's up, and up, ByteDance's valuation is going in the exact opposite direction. Right. But Dana, I got to say on that, does SpaceX and Starlink, do they stay private or go public? Given how worked up Elon is getting about the Delaware court as it relates to Tesla and all the hassles of having to be a publicly traded company, man, I got to think that these companies stay private.
Yeah, I don't think Elon likes being a public company CEO. I mean, it opens you up to just far more scrutiny. You've got to deal with earnings every quarter. I mean, I think he tried to take Tesla private back in 2018 and then had to back out of that when it was clear that was going to be way harder to do than he realized. And the whole thing with the funding secured at 420 and the Saudis. So, but yeah, I mean, why go? The reason to go public, it's really a fundraising event. Like, you go public because you need to raise money. If SpaceX can continue to raise money from private investors and venture capitalists and private equity and get these lucrative government contracts, like, I don't think he would want to go. But yeah, I mean, Gwen Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, at an investor conference a couple of years ago, said that she could see spinning Starlink out at some point when Starlink had positive revenue. I don't think they're there yet. But if you're Elon, like, what upside is there to going public? There's zero.
The case for going public is that, his like ability to raise capital from the public markets is much greater.
Yeah, because you get to tap into all those.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw like the retail investors of Tesla gave him wrote him a $50 billion check after declining. Like, you can, like, Elon Musk, as persuasive as he is with, major private market investors.
It's the retail crowd.
It's the retail crowd that really, will go for this.
That's fair. Here's my prediction. He neither IPOs SpaceX or Starlink, but does an IPO spinoff of his deorbit vehicle unit. Okay, well, we'll see how this first one does in a few years when they try to blow this thing up. Okay, in other news, down in Washington, Max, the Supreme Court had a couple big rulings on social media that could affect Elon Musk's X. Tell us all about them.
All right, so the top line here is that the status quo for social media stays the same. But just going a little bit deeper on that, you had a case about a week ago where a couple of states had sued the Biden administration over essentially accusations that came up during the Twitter files. This was the idea that the government was, improperly influencing social media companies. Supreme Court said, now this is a bit of a rebuke for people who really thought the Twitter files were a big game changer, essentially said that there was no reason to think that this had actually happened in any kind of sustained way. There was a second sort of two cases that the Supreme Court kicked back to lower courts earlier this week, and these were over laws in Texas and Florida that would essentially prevent social media companies from doing the kind of moderation that they do currently. So it's saying like, you're not allowed to like throw somebody off a platform. You have to give people like an absolute right to free speech on social media. That's kind of Elon Musk's position.
Correct.
The court effectively is saying that for now, social media companies have free speech rights as well, which means that they can sort of do whatever they want with their platforms. So that's the the status quo stays the same. Now, does this affect Elon Musk in any way? Probably not. I mean, his sort of maximalist view of the First Amendment could be seen as being rebuffed, but for now, X will just continue operating as it's operated.
I see. And as a result, the effect on the 2024 campaign and use of social media in the 2024 campaign and disinformation campaigns, any impact there?
No, like I said, status quo is going to say the same. I mean, I think that that probably like public pressure on social media companies matters because these companies have constituencies that include like investors and users and so on. And if a social media, in the same way that you can kind of like work the refs, like in a game and sort of push them towards making decisions that are close to what you like.
I gotcha. So we are now joined by Bloomberg's global auto czar, Craig Trudell, to talk about Tesla second quarter sales. Craig, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Dana, we will start with you though here. Tell us what exactly were the numbers and how should we interpret them?
Yeah, so Tesla delivered 443,956 vehicles in the second quarter. Those are global figures. It was still a 5% year-over-year decline, but the numbers that were released this morning were better than what analysts were expecting, and you're seeing the shares move higher as a result.
This is a matter of a few thousand vehicles, more than analysts were expecting. I think, the consensus that we had was about a 5.8% decline. So all of 1 percentage point has meant, a roughly 10% move just this morning, which is really remarkable, but also kind of par for the course with this stock. You guys have had Esha Day on here before to kind of talk about Tesla as a stock and how much that's a big aspect of the story for this company. When this name gets momentum, it really moves in dramatic ways. And we've seen that, just in the last few weeks, even as everybody was anticipating these numbers weren't going to be that great, there's been so much emphasis and focus on the future in no small part thanks to Elon and his comments at the annual meeting recently.
Yeah, so on the stock, we spent a fair amount of time in the first half of the year talking about its cratering. It had, at its nadir back in April, it was down almost 50%. It was quite the plunge. It has roared back since, as you guys are alluding to. It's gained more than 50% since then, and really isn't down much year to date at all now. So Craig, how do I square that rebound with these sales numbers that just came out? Again, I get that the sales numbers weren't quite as bad as expected, but they were still down.
I suppose. I mean, I guess this has always been, a story stock to some degree, right? I mean, it's always been the case that, if you talk with a sort of more traditional automotive analyst, that they've generally, and very consistently said that this valuation, doesn't make a sense in their universe. But as long as you're looking at this as a tech company and putting serious amounts of value on businesses that don't exist, in the case of Robo Taxis or Optimus robots, you can sort of put whatever number you like on this, and Elon, may call you something other than boneheaded.
The other thing I was just going to point out about the release today is that they flagged their energy storage numbers. So Tesla has two divisions, automotive and energy storage. Energy storage is when they sell these big batteries known as megapacks to utilities like PG&E and the Powerwall to consumers. And like the energy division has always played this big backseat to automotive in terms of revenue. But now with the automotive sales obviously no longer showing robust growth, they're like really flagging energy as like this big growth thing. So it was just funny to see in a in a quarterly release that's all about vehicle deliveries that they flag how awesome the energy sales are going. And I think you're going to see Elon talk a lot more about energy on the earnings call later this month.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the act of diversion and obfuscation. That is the second time in recent weeks, Dana, that you brought energy storage up. I feel an entire segment or episode coming up on that topic soon. Max, though, how did you take the numbers?
Well, like Craig is saying, we've been talking for months about what I think in retrospect was a really kind of audacious move by Elon Musk. We have a car company that is priced like a growth stock that has stopped growing. And we've been talking for a long time about how that's a pretty big problem. If you're a growth stock and you're not growing, that's a problem. And what we've seen is Elon Musk, over the course of several months, essentially reframe the story. And now it's been reframed. It's no longer a car company. He's said that a million times, despite the fact that, as we see from these delivery numbers, they sure sell a lot of cars. Seems to be the bulk of their revenue, but nonetheless, what the investors are clearly focused on, and we've seen this now in the stock reaction today, in the pay vote, over the last several months, is this autonomy story. And what's interesting here, and is getting lost. So they sold, almost all of these sales are Model 3, Model Y. That's the kind of lower end car. Tesla also sells, of course, Model S, Model X, and a Cybertruck.
But they basically sell almost none of those.
None of those. And remember we talked about at the end of last year, like, wow, the Cybertruck, this could really, change the game for Tesla. Pickup trucks are the best-selling category.
They don't even break it out separately. It's under other models.
It looks like a very, very small number, 20,000 total other models. So, I mean, you're talking about a number of Cybertrucks that, would be insignificant to like a Toyota or Ford or whatever. So it's just pretty staggering, first of all, that the company has gone in this direction, and then also that investors are up for it. They like it.
Yeah. So, Craig, I actually have been thinking about this for a while now, this point on the Model S's and X's. And, these are older models that are selling at this point negligible amounts. As Max is saying, it's all about the Y, it's all about the 3. The Cybertruck is just ramping up if it even goes anywhere. Why not put a bullet in the S and the X? Aren't they just a distraction?
I think they do still sell for fairly significant amounts of money, and so perhaps you can kind of make the argument that continuing to amortize the investment in those vehicles makes some sense. But as we do look ahead to where this company is going, and sort of pay close attention to the fact that Musk is very much focused on autonomy and on robo taxis, to the extent that he is able to actually stand up that business and does want to sort of, put more emphasis on that going forward, would it make sense to potentially, switch up the existing factory capacity that you have to make those vehicles over, ones that now are quite long in the tooth, that Musk has said we probably shouldn't keep making them anymore, and are really just sort of doing so for posterity reasons?
On the fleet point in general, and this has come up a fair amount in the past, but I suppose it's going to keep coming up. Not just the S and the X, but the totality of the fleet, with the exception of the Cybertruck, Dana. As I drive around the streets of the tri-state county area, man, these Teslas, they just look old and tired. I mean, you drive around, you bump into, you see Rivians in the wild, and some of the new Fords and the Kias and the VWs. It just seems like these are just yesterday's cars.
I think the calculation that Elon Musk made is that, look, like they were the first company to really bring electric cars into the mainstream, full stop. But now electric cars are quite common. And here in California, same thing. I mean, I see Rivians, I see a lot of Hyundais. And like being an electric car maker is no longer enough to set you apart from the pack. What sets you apart from the pack is that you are electric and fully autonomous. And that is what Elon is going for. And Craig and I have had long debates back and forth about whether this is like real or vaporware, and like at what point does Tesla actually get, level 5 regulatory approval? I mean, that's all still very pie in the sky. But Musk believes in his heart that they are on the cusp of full autonomy. And he just wants to be valued as a tech company. He sees NVIDIA and all of these other players getting these crazy valuations, and he wants Tesla to be thought of in that vein. And so he is all about Tesla doesn't really just make cars. They are making autonomous cars.
So, Dana, your point is he's not up for playing this game that the traditional car makers play, which is, hey, we're going to refresh our fleet every...
I think that Elon is just bored of making cars. It's like very capital intensive. And like it's always been about...
Dana, he's bored making cars, but he wants them to pay him $200 and some odd billion when car making is your main job.
Right. But he's been at this for a very long time. It is capital intensive. It is grueling. You're fighting for market share. He's got BYD coming out like after him. Like he's just just constantly refreshing models and constantly coming out with new models is just, it's boring for him. I mean, you can see it.
It's just nickel dime stuff, Max.
He wants to be like cutting edge Mr. Future. And that's the
industrialist of our time, as you've often said.
I do think, for Elon Musk and for the people who sort of buy this, it's the comparison is a tech company, not a car company, and I think all along, the reason they are not refreshing the Model 3 or whatever, and the reason this is happening is because Musk has long seen like the model as Apple, right? The iPhone form factor has been essentially unchanged for almost the entire time that the iPhone has, existed. Every other company's iPhone-like device looks exactly like it, right? The differentiator is the software. And that's what Musk sees.
Right, and he would argue those are where the refreshes come. And the software,
but
right?
I think there are real questions about whether that is how consumers feel. And even when we're talking about autonomy, Dan is saying talking about, maybe they'll get the level 5 approval or whatever. Obviously there are so many questions there, and I think it's going to take way longer than Elon Musk assumes. But then on the other side, there's a question of, do consumers care? Is the assumption that this is a game changer going to be true for a regular person who drives a regular car? And we don't know the answer to that question yet, but we have seen some signs. And one of which is it doesn't seem like they have been that successful in selling full self-driving or whatever you want to call it, this ADAS system to customers. Customers, they've dropped the price. It doesn't look like...
How much does it cost now?
Well, it was, $200 a month? Now they're down to $100 a month. They're sort of giving it away.
The take rate is not thought to be very high.
Right. And I think that, and when you talk to normal people, and every time I'm sure Dan and Craig do this as well, but you're in an Uber, you ask them about full self-driving. It's pretty rare when I ask the question that someone is like, yeah, it's the best. Most people are like, I don't use it, or yeah, it's okay. And I just don't think they've managed to convince regular, normal drivers that this thing is worth paying for yet.
Craig, on the Robo Taxi, you guys have referred to it. It's coming soon, right? The big reveal. They're gonna bring it out on stage. They're gonna bring something out on stage, covered in a blanket, or and then Elon's gonna, with great pomp and circumstance, pull the blanket away. We're gonna see something. When exactly is that coming?
Yeah, I'd like a bingo card for that event. Is he wearing the Texas hat?
We are working on the bingo.
Craig.
Today's your day,
we are doing it.
Yeah, so that's August 8th. And to Max's point, I do think the fact that this company has been taking people's money for years now and deferring revenue that it collects related to full self-driving, and actually when you sort of look closely at their quarterly filings and compare the deferred revenue that they're actually recognizing versus what they thought they would recognize, the prior year, those numbers have never matched up. They've always overestimated how much revenue they're going to generate from or recognize from that sort of, piggy bank that they've, kind of set aside in acknowledgement of the fact that full self-driving is not actually self-driving. So, this is a company that for years, if you're sort of a close parser of regulatory filings, has acknowledged the fact that they've oversold this stuff. And not only do we not know to what extent consumers are ready to take this on, I think we have some real questions about just how ready regulators are, because if you look at what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has to say about Tesla's lower level systems, autopilot I'm referring to here, they have real concerns about the safety gap between, how the company is marketing this and how they're deploying it versus what it's actually capable of.
Robotaxi, of course, the level of angst among regulators and scrutiny is going to be that much greater. I will just say, though, Max, that you got to say here that between Robo Taxi talk and all by doing whatever it was that he had to do, stabilizing sales to some extent, slashing payrolls, by the way. In recent months, he's cut payrolls almost 20%. Okay, you take all those things together, and he's done it again. He has turned the tide on a stock that seemed to be in free fall.
Yeah, I totally agree. Listen, there are some real questions about whether this strategy is real. And I mean, you're talking about like, are Robo Taxi going to happen? I think Elon probably thinks that's a problem for the Trump administration to solve. I think it's going to be a problem for like the Eric Trump administration or the Donald Jr. Trump administration. Like this is a decades long regulation problem, not something that's going to happen soon. But in the near term, yeah, he's done it. He really has. I mean, he completely managed to change the narrative to turn what should be a real problem for a company that makes cars, which is that it's not selling them as much as it wants to, into like almost an asset. It's, sorry, we're not a car company anymore. We're a software company.
Don't worry about that. But he has, Craig, pushed sales volume at any price, cutting prices repeatedly. That presumably has come and will continue to come at the cost of margin. I mean, is that something we're going to see playing out in coming quarters?
Yeah, Dana mentioned the energy storage deployments, and it is a very dramatic increase. But I think we've also watched very closely how that has actually translated in terms of revenue, and we've not really seen evidence that is really moving the needle. I think the fundamentals of this company's business are sort of continuing to deteriorate and sort of, matching, maybe what the stock was doing months ago. And it's been fascinating to see the shares, really sort of come roaring back just these last few weeks.
I just looked at the Bloomberg terminal, and shares are only down like 7.6% for the year now. I mean, that is a big difference from where we were. Basically
flat. I mean, it's true, Dana, that the market overall is up like 15% or so. So 7% down is still 7% down at a time when everything else is up. But you're absolutely right. I mean, to have gone from almost 50% down to down just 7% year to date is quite a thing.
I just want to make one more point, which we've pounded on quite a bit on this show and elsewhere, which is that, like, Elon is fundamentally just this like master marketer, master of the narrative. It's like the man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz kind of stuff, where he really does like drop these clues. It's almost like a QAnon drop, and the fans go bananas. So the other thing that happened this week was he started following Travis Kalanick, which everyone saw as this clue that like the Robo Taxi is going to partner with Uber, or like that, and he's called it the cyber cab. And so like just when he does stuff like that, like the fans go ballistic, and they are all in on like this future vision. And it is like a cult in a lot of ways in terms of the way that the stock moves and the way that, everyone rallies around the leader. And there have been these real pivot points where you're like, oh my God, is he going to be able to pull this out? Is he going to be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat? And like, he does it over and over again to the point where like, we're all very cynical about it, but obviously investors are not. And that's the disconnect that I think some of us feel. It's like, wow, they're really going for this yet again, but we've seen this play over and over again.
Craig, great to have you on. Don't be a stranger. Come back soon.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, to wrap this up now, we're going to do a segment that I'm going to be honest, I know absolutely nothing about. Max, tell us all about it. Something about Elon trying to make X a kinder, gentler place.
Yeah, we've talked about this in past episodes. Elon, you may think of him as a trolling, poster who loves to just stir the pot, but he has a softer side. And that softer side wants to see content that isn't divisive, that doesn't, rile people up, that's just beautiful.
Such as...
And so yesterday, this is, I'd say, one of my favorite all-time Elon Musk posts. He posted a tweet by an account called L Lookbook. It's basically like a bunch of essentially beautiful interiors. And it looks like something out of Brides magazine. It's like an all-white interior with a bed kind of in the background and an arch and some plants.
Summer bedroom.
It's just a gorgeous... It looks like your ideal Airbnb in Newport or something.
Sweet.
And Elon wrote, would be lovely to see more accounts on X simply posting beautiful content.
Okay.
And I say, Elon, here. Let's all come together.
But I'm seeing...
He wants X to become Pinterest or something.
Well, I feel like I'm seeing a direction of travel, because just the previous week, right, he said, when I told everyone to go, all the, advertisers to go F themselves, I didn't mean go F yourself. And now, again, he's just continuing on that line. And man, can't we just post beautiful, anodyne, silly things?
It's weird because the J.K. Rowling one was sort of felt like a specific comment about J.K. Rowling, where he was saying, "Hey,
what was that? Remind me."
Yeah, he had suggested that essentially, I'm paraphrasing probably badly, but essentially that she had been posting all this controversial stuff. Wouldn't it be better if she was just posting stuff about wizards or Harry Potter or something? Here, yeah, like Dana says, it's like, well, wouldn't it be great if we just had some nice interiors on this site instead of all this divisive content? And I thought, okay, maybe this is turning over a leaf, but you really don't have to go too far before he's down in the timeline, before he's back in the mix politically. So
just back in the scrum and just fighting and scrapping. So Dana, though, you see that post and it says Pinterest to you.
Well, it's a summer bedroom. I mean, I see flowers, I see white sheets, white walls. The person who posted it is Eva Loves Design. And it's like a Pinterest board, like my favorite interiors for my summer cottage or something like that.
So now, Max, is that the totality of the kinder, gentler X from Elon, or were there other things that put you in that direction? That was it?
That's the totality, yes.
That's the totality. Max, Dana, thanks for joining.
Always a pleasure.
Great to be here.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott, Antonia Mufarech, and Arafat Jalasho Perry. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Noonan is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporter, Joel Weber. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.